Welcome to the Thriving Misfits, the podcast where we celebrate resilience, embrace diversity, and challenge norms. I'm your host, Fiona Young, and today we're joined by an extraordinary guest, Brian Henderson, an award-winning influencer and advocate for mental health and wellness, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging. With a unique ability to create safe spaces for learning, healing, and growing, Brian is dedicated to building the relational skills and culture necessary for high-performing teams and thriving individuals. Brian's superpower lies in empowering teams to develop empathy, compassion, inclusive leadership, and psychological safety. As the founder of Whole Business Wellness Limited, he has inspired senior leadership teams across the globe to become more conscious, connected, and inclusive. With over 30 years of experience spanning the UK, France, and Asia, Brian has held global, regional, and functional leadership roles in major international law firms. As a social innovator and NGO board member, he has been instrumental in fostering peer support communities and championing mental health awareness. Additionally, as a yoga teacher and mindful dialogue practitioner, he brings a holistic approach to wellness and leadership. Join us as we explore Brian's inspiring journey and gain valuable insights into creating inclusive, resilient, and thriving workplace cultures. Hi, Brian. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for the very kind and generous introduction. Real pleasure to be with you today.
Great. Now, the listeners would like to know more about you, Brian. So let's kick it off with a rapid fire round of questions. Now, you just said and described that creating safe spaces as your superpower is your superpower. So if you could give your DEI superpower to a famous historical figure, who would it be and how would they use it?
Well, I think we could pick any strongman leader, someone who's caused a lot of suffering and pain to others, because nobody would dare to say no to them. So it might be Putin today, it might have been Hitler, or there are other politicians today I'm sure people can think of. But if only these guys, and they do tend to be all guys, could have had the courage and the skills to create this safe space where advisors could say, do you know what? I think that invasion may not be such a smart idea, or I think suppressing this minority violently might not be so smart. Where their advisors could speak freely without fear of being fired, or maybe even locked up, or maybe even killed. If they had that superpower of creating those safe spaces and being able to listen to the advice they've been given, the world could be a very different place.
Oh, yes. I think this is a superpower all of us should have, especially these individuals that you've just described. Now, you are a yoga teacher, and something that the listeners probably didn't know about me is that I am also a certified singing bowl sound healer, certified by my Nepalese master. But I've been usually practicing that with just myself, with friends, with families. And now, if you could lead a yoga retreat focused on building DEI awareness, what would be the theme of the retreat? And what kind of activities would you include to foster connection and understanding amongst the participants?
Yeah, so I'd love to do that retreat, and it would be focused on inclusion. And you mentioned in connection and dialogue, so we would call it inclusive dialogue. So how do we relate to each other in a way that feels more inclusive? So I haven't done it as a retreat, but I have done something similar with my friend Genevieve Tang as an online course during COVID, using this mindful dialogue approach, which we called inclusive dialogue. So that would still be the theme. And the reason for that is because we've kind of lost that skill of dialogue. In a world where social media portrays everything as kind of simplistic. It's right or wrong. It's black or white. It's me or you. It's us or them. We lose a lot of the ability to slow down and to listen deeply to the other. So I'm right, you're wrong, and I don't care what you think. I'm just caught in my own little world. So to really tap into that ability to slow down and to listen deeply, we need to come really into the body, to embody into practice, which means tuning into the sensations in the body, everything we can experience in the face, the heat or the tightness, the tension around the neck, the throat, the chest, and the tummy. That's where we experience all of our emotions as through the vagus nerve. And when we can tap into our emotions, we can actually attune to other people much more skillfully. So to help people come into their bodies, most people live very much in their heads these days, lots of thinking and ruminating and anxiety. We do a little bit of gentle yoga, we do some breath work, we just help people to relax, come out of the head into the body. And then the mindful dialogue, we do that by having a separate speaker and listener role, usually in a pair. And that allows us to really focus deeply, listen deeply to what is being communicated and how it's affecting us as we receive that communication. So if I'm listening, I'm just listening and observing. I'm not trying to summarize. I'm not trying to ask a smart question or come back and think, what am I going to say in response to this? I'm just noticing. And if I'm speaking, I can relax because I'm not going to be interrupted. I'm not going to be judged. I can just share my personal lived experience. And the topics to do with inclusion would be things like, how does it feel when I'm excluded? So we can all, I'm sure, bring to mind a time when we felt excluded in some way. And we can tap into the physical experience, and that's a very sort of constricted, uncomfortable, unpleasant, visceral feeling. Or even if we're trying to be an ally and we want to call people out, how do I feel about calling people out? I mean, of course, I know it's the right thing to do, but it still can feel very awkward, very uncomfortable because I don't know how that conversation is going to go. I don't know if they're going to ostracize me, call me the DEI police or something like that. So when we can really tap into these feelings and sensations and emotions in the body, we can really understand ourselves and our own reaction. We can tune into the other person because what we're feeling is probably mirroring what they're feeling and expressing. And that really allows us to cultivate this sense of connectedness and inclusion, a totally different way of relating to each other, which I think as a society we have lost the skill, because it's a skill that you have to practice. If we don't practice it, we tend to lose it. And of course, the singing bowls I love as well. So you would definitely be part of our retreat.
That would be an honor. Definitely let me know if you're planning something like that. And I like what you mentioned about, really truly listening. We've been told, especially in the corporate environment, that we have to actively listen by paraphrasing, summarizing, asking smart questions. But actually, it's just listening with the intent to understand and not just to respond. So I really like your sharing, and it makes me feel super calm already. Now, our childhood informs us how we are going to grow up, and also our passions and the purpose that we see in life. Now, what childhood experience actually taught you the importance of vulnerability, especially as a man? And how has it influenced your approach to creating supportive environments for your male counterparts?
Yeah, I grew up in an environment where there were basically two tribes and they did not listen to each other at all. So I grew up in Belfast in the 1970s, where there was a terror campaign. It was the IRA who wanted to separate from the United Kingdom, and the Loyalist and Unionist parties who wanted to remain part of the UK. And the leaders on both sides, of course, they were all men in the 1970s, and they were hard men. I mean, very alpha male, very strong, very never back down, show no fear, show no weakness, show no emotions, like zero vulnerability was allowed. And you just shouted at the other side. So anger, aggression, kind of quite extreme views. So there was no coming together, there was no listening, there was no trying to understand. And of course, that was very polarizing, and it resulted in 30 years of violence until we finally got some sort of peace there. So I found that very, very weird. I thought everybody here is crazy. I found it quite depressing. So I left that part of the world as soon as I could to go to university somewhere else. But that's always stuck with me, that how you just get negative outcomes when you have that very polarizing lack of connection, that lack of vulnerability. And of course, they were all male leaders, so I can't figure that that's often a pattern that is repeated in many contexts. So that's really what inspired me to try to grapple with that. It's a really tough question, and it's been with me for a lifetime. So still working on it, but I feel very passionately that they have to find that sense of connection, understanding, and common humanity.
Now, you are an advocate to raise awareness with regards to mental health. And, for me, I was diagnosed with depression when I was a teenager, eventually learned how to deal with it. And I'm sure that probably you also had some personal experiences that you can share. How has your own mental health journey influenced your work that you're doing right now?
Yes, well, I'm sorry to hear about your diagnosis. Yes, the same for me, actually. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. I was experiencing really like insomnia. I could sleep for 2 or 3 hours a night, and that would be it. And chronic gastritis as well, so it really showed up in my whole digestive system, really upset tummy. I was working in a very high-profile role, as you described in the intro, as a leader in a big international complex environment. So that I just experienced this very traumatic burnout. And that's really what drove me, I think, to work on mental health and wellness advocacy and training and culture development, all the things we've talked about so far. And that whole kind of self-care, self-awareness. Because when I was going down that dark hole, I actually didn't really know what was happening, and I didn't know how much it was affecting me. I mean, I knew I was pretty miserable, but I didn't know how it was affecting my relationships very clearly. I didn't realize how much it was affecting my work performance all that clearly. I just thought, well, I'm just getting through, I'm surviving, I'm doing my best, and it will get better. So, I think what I learned from that is that self-awareness is super important. If you're not aware of yourself, you need friends around that you can trust to give you feedback and say, look, I've noticed these things, what's going on? And I guess, like we've talked about strong men, there's that element of I'm the boss, I've got to just keep going, and I've got to, like, if I show I'm feeling anxious, everybody else is going to feel anxious, and that's going to be a catastrophe. So I've just got to suck it up. So getting beyond that mindset to feel like, okay, it's okay to feel these things, and it's okay to ask for help, is a key lesson that I learned, because my recovery took about 18 months, and it was long and painful, and I had to quit my dream job. And yeah, it was tough. But, that was me caught in my man box right there. Show no weakness, be strong, just rely on yourself, don't ask for help. But also I found nobody really checked in on me either, so people could see I was struggling. My PA told me, oh, I'm so relieved that you're finally quit, Brian, because I could see you were so miserable for so long. But nobody really checked in, see, are you okay? I've noticed these changes. What's going on? Do you want to talk about it? What support do you need? So those little questions cost you nothing. They take minutes. It doesn't need to be 2 hours of short time crying on the shoulder. It can really save lives, save careers, save health crises. So that's, I think, what I learned from my journey and what I try to share and encourage in other people.
I think it's really important that especially you as a leader, big corporations are able to share that vulnerability with others so that they can resonate with you. And it's not just them, it actually can hit any one of us. And you and I, we're both living in Asia. For me, it's 1.5 decades already. I'm not sure about you. It's probably about that length.
Yep, same, 12 years.
12 years. Now, do you see that there's also a cultural aspect when it comes to talking and also raising awareness around mental health?
Yes, I think very much so. I think it's very much an Asian culture. It's kind of face-driven, and shame is a very strong part of Asian culture, so I understand it. And there is a stigma. So if you're having some sort of mental health problem, that it's your problem and you shouldn't show it to other people. It's bringing shame to you, it's bringing shame to your family. And so you're really kind of on your own. So that shame and that stigma is there in the Western context as well. But I think in the Western world, like in the US, like everybody has a therapist. They're quite happy to talk about their therapist and that relationship that they have. So yeah, I do see the cultural differences. I think the other difference that I see, which exacerbates that here as well, is the management and leadership style that's kind of associated with the parenting style. So it's a very tough kind of culture. So you got 98% in your exam. What happened to the other 2%? I think most Asian kids still resonate with that. So they tell me. that management by sort of fear and that looking up to the boss to tell us what to do kind of creates a sense of helplessness and anxiety and uncertainty. So I think there's a lot of factors in the culture here that kind of make it more difficult for people to express their feelings. And I've had guys that I've been teaching meditation to say, right, I can't feel anything in my body, because they're so conditioned to suppress their emotion, and so they can't even notice it. And to be fair, I had that experience as well. Younger stage in my life, somebody asked me, "Can you tell us how you're feeling in this moment?" And I could not feel anything in my body. So I think that's also, particularly for men in Asia, it's a massive challenge. How do I even notice what those emotional experiences that I'm having? Never mind, how do I articulate them and find the courage to do that?
And they also don't have that. Yeah, and they don't have the emotional vocabulary, right? And this is something that I'm already starting with my 1.5-year-old to really determine what are the different emotions. It's not just sad, it's not just anger. There's so many more on the spectrum. And I think we need to provide people with the emotional vocabulary so that they are aware of how they are actually feeling.
Yeah, so movies like Inside Out and Inside Out 2 are so helpful, because then people can see, oh yeah, there are this whole spectrum of emotions and it's kind of complicated and we all feel it. So yeah, exactly. It's an educational process.
Now, you are the founder of Whole Business Wellness. What is maybe one creative wellness strategy that you've implemented to enhance DEI in a corporate setting?
Yeah, well, we're just talking about Asia and Asian culture, and creativity and thinking strategically are not necessarily things that we do particularly well in this part of the world. But what I think we could do more of is this, both to support mental health and DI, because to me they're very integrally linked. If you don't feel safe, if you don't feel like you belong, if you don't feel included, you're going to feel anxious, you're going to feel like you're walking on eggshells, you're going to feel like you're not appreciated, so it's going to undermine your mental health and well-being. So really focusing on these dialogue skills. So the dialogue skills that I would try to teach, so first of all, you do have to slow down. If you're constantly rushing, you're going to miss a lot of cues, a lot of information. You're not really going to hear everything that's being communicated. The first thing is you have to slow down and you have to relax. It's when you slow down, you start to see all these things, and you can start to feel other people's pain and discomfort and emotions and so on. So you have to be able to relax with all of that. And then really listen deeply and be really curious. Okay, this is a human being and they're having these experiences, and can I help them to express and process their own experience by just asking open questions without having an agenda. So those are the kind of skills that we try to teach, and that people find, like 5-year-olds do this. 5-year-olds ask all sorts of questions all the time, and if any parents out there, how annoying it can make. It's just question. But that's because the kids are curious and they genuinely want to learn, and they ask some amazing questions that really make you think, wow, actually, I'm not sure I know the answer to that one. So having that curiosity and that willingness to keep going down that direction with the partner you're talking to, the person you're communicating with, and all about that connection, that curiosity, the compassion, and the courage to stay with it even when the conversation gets a bit uncomfortable. So those are the kind of skills and strategies and approaches that I think really make a difference. Because actually, however much we want to change our environment, our corporate, our boss, our colleagues, you cannot, right? All you can change is yourself and how you feel and how you respond to whatever's going on, however frustrating, however annoying, however exclusionary they might be. That is what it is. It's really about how do you engage with that more wisely, so you can express, when you do this, I feel that. It'd be really nice if you could do it a different way, and this is how it'd be better for me. So this is really, it sounds like people call it soft skills, but it's really, really, really hard. And it does take a lot of practice. So that's what I try to help people with their well-being and strategy.
I think this is so essential that you just mentioned. It takes practice. It sounds easy, but it's not so simple to actually implement that, especially when you're in a frustrating situation, to actually react more resourceful, pause before reacting. So I think, as you mentioned rightly, it sounds simple, but we need to practice it every single day and become much more aware of how our emotions actually impact our reactions. And instead of reacting, maybe we should just take a pause and breathe. It sounds so simple, right? But yeah, I think the simple things.
It goes to this. There's this big gap between knowing and doing. Right. So it is simple conceptually. This is really, really simple stuff, and people feel, yeah, I get it, therefore I can do it. But unfortunately, the reality is that's not always the case. Conceptually, I can see how you ride a bike, but I've never ridden a bike before. For sure, I'm going to fall many times before I'm actually able to ride the bike. You just got to get on, sit still, and push the pedals. So it's simple. So there's that huge gap between, yeah, I know it, I understand it, therefore I can do it, and actually accepting that maybe it takes a bit of practice. Like I don't quite have all the skills as polished as I would like to think I do, and yeah, it's worth investing some time to cultivate that with intention.
Right. Now, a lot of our listeners, they feel like a misfit. They don't feel like they belong. What kind of advice, what is your top advice that you would give to young people, especially men, who are struggling with feeling like they do not belong?
Well, I wish I had a magic wand. But as Brené Brown said, that we never belong more than the level of our self-acceptance. So if we feel like I don't belong here, or I'm not good enough here, or I don't fit in here, or I'm a misfit, then of course we're not going to feel like we belong. And so we all have our inner critic, and that is really often quite toxic and very loud, very harsh, and it's a voice that we would never speak to another person in. So I think, particularly for guys, for everybody, women have this in their own ways as well. But for the guys that we're conditioned to be protector, to be the provider, to be the strong one, to be independent, to show no fear or emotion, if we can just accept that, okay, we still have that young boy inside who is curious, who is playful, who is loving, who is tender, and see that as actually courage. It's actually it takes real courage in modern community and modern society for a guy to tap into all of that and to show it and to express it. But believe me, when I talk about my men's community with my female friends, they all say, yeah, I sent my guy, he really needs this. So, if guys can do this and tap into this, actually it does improve your relationship with your partner, improves the relationship with your kids, it actually will improve your relationship with all your friends and colleagues. Actually, you will end up probably having a happier life and being more successful. So, yeah, so it's a lot of work, it's a lot to take on, but we all have it within us. We all have that ability. We just got to have the courage and the skill and the support to work on it. I think creating those safe spaces we've talked about, there's very few spaces where men can actually come together and do this work of unpacking and expressing and exploring all of that. So that's what I try to do.
Absolutely. Now, thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of the Thriving Misfits, where we've had the pleasure of speaking with Brian, an inspiring advocate for mental health, wellness, and vulnerability. His dedication to creating safe spaces for men and fostering inclusive environments has provided us with invaluable insights into building empathy and resilience within our communities. We hope you found today's conversation enlightening and inspiring. Remember, embracing our uniqueness and supporting mental health can lead to more connected and thriving communities. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Thriving Misfits on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. So thank you once again for joining us today. Thank you so much, Brian. And let's continue to celebrate our differences, embrace vulnerability, and thrive together as misfits. Until the next time.